Let's let you do that for sure. Hi, you beautiful people. I just did a quick live on Instagram to let the folks there know that I was going live over here. And now here we are. So here, though, is different depending on where you're tuning in, because I'm broadcasting through Restream, which I love doing because it allows me to go to multiple places simultaneously. Super fancy. So report in. Let me know where you're watching. I'd love to welcome you to the broadcast. I'm Bonnie Gillespie. Kate Greer is watching from Facebook. Hello, sweetheart. So glad you could join in. We're also pushing through to YouTube and Periscope, which pushes to Twitter, not Facebook. We will leave comments open on the Facebook version, though, for those who watch in replay, so that if you're like, I want to have part of this conversation, I want to take part in this, great, pop on over to the Facebook version in replay to pop in your comments, and I will, of course, circle back and answer any questions that you have about Mercury Retrograde, because that's what we're going to talk about today. John is watching at Periscope. Hello, sweetheart. I'm so glad you could join in. Glad to see you. Yay! Okay, cool. So here's the deal. I know, the woo is a big part of how I do my life. It's a big part of how I was brought up. It's a big part of how I have better understanding of what my experiences are going to be like on the daily. So it's something that over time has become worked more and more into conversations that I'm having with clients for self-management for actors and enoughness work. And I find it fascinating how many times people will come to me saying, I need an agent, but can we talk about my numerology? Or I really need to boost up my self-confidence. I just definitely am low on this enoughness scale, but let me talk to you about my chart, like what sign I am. And I love having conversations about how to rig the calendar to be most in your favor when you're doing cool things like submitting to an agent. Like, there's not just best times of the year to be doing that based on the industry's calendar, but also based on what the moon is doing. So I'm all about, let's get all of that on our own side. Hello, Ana de la Cruz in Woodland Hills, watching through Periscope and Twitter. Awesome. Thank you so much, Ana. Glad you could join in. Fabulous. So first off, you don't have to be into the woo to benefit from this. I'm going to be talking about things that are going on in the cosmic calendar. And if you're like, oh, wow, that explains that, great, don't even worry about it. But if you're like, I know exactly what my sign is, I know what house my whatever is in, and I know that Mercury's about to go retrograde, that's what we're going to talk about right now. Because Mercury retrograde, so let's see, how can I simplify this to the extreme? Everything goes in retrograde at some point, okay? Jay, watching at YouTube, beautiful, glad you're here, gorgeous. Everything goes in retrograde at some point. And all it is the optical illusion that something is moving backwards. Okay, so there's that. It's just that happens. It is fact. And it is that when things are at different orbits and different places in orbit based on where we are, Earth, things look like they're moving backwards out there in the sky when they're really not. But it's just an illusion that does have cosmic effect. So the reason Mercury is the one you hear about, because you're like, I never hear about Jupiter going retrograde. When's the last time I heard about Pluto going retrograde? Well, those of us who pay attention to that do absolutely know when the last time was that Jupiter went retrograde and paid attention to all the stuff that happened earlier this year. My point is, the reason we hear about Mercury the most is because Mercury is really close to us, and it is, therefore, a greater effect on us, and it goes retrograde more frequently because of where it is in the orbit and how close it is to the Earth, okay? So Venus retrograde, a little bit less often, and so on progressively out into the solar system. Did you know that? Very cool, right? So the other thing is, when something like Neptune goes retrograde, it stays retrograde a long time. Becky is saying that sound isn't synced with video. Try leaving and coming back, or maybe go watch at YouTube. Sometimes there can be a lag at Facebook that doesn't exist at YouTube, but since I am pushing through a third-party service, Restream, sometimes that can cause the glitch. But see if you go out and come back in and see if that makes a difference. I hope it does. And hopefully the glitch is not there in replay. Also, okay, so The reason we pay attention to Mercury retrograde is because it happens more frequently. And it happens more frequently, but doesn't last for very long, as opposed to the planets that are farther out, they don't happen as frequently, but when they do happen, they are in retrograde for much longer periods of time. So Mercury goes retrograde, and when that stuff happens, oh my goodness gracious, because Mercury is the planet that rules communication, we find things go a little haywire that we notice pretty quickly. Email goes down, Facebook goes down, Instagram goes down, Google goes down. By the way, the last time all of those big outages happened earlier this year, Mercury was in retrograde. Not shocked. It is just fascinating to me that we can have something like this and go, okay, we'll see if that actually is the way things are. And then we start paying attention and we're like, holy shit, that is in fact exactly the way things are. It's very much like how a full moon, if you ask anybody who works in police enforcement or at hospitals, people on a full moon are way crazier. They do way braver things that get them arrested more and get them in the hospital more. And so it is just crazy town how we are, in fact, noticing patterns that even if you're like, nope, I'm not affected at all by what is going on in the planets. It's cool. You don't have to believe it. We got data that shows that there is an increase of these types of things happening during these periods of times. So why not lean into that and go, let me see how I can rig this in my favor. Because if it's going to happen, let me not be the one who gets snagged by it. So where you can a lot of times get snagged on a Mercury retrograde is stuff like your flight is delayed. And yes, flights get delayed all the time, not just during Mercury retrograde. There's just a far greater number of them that tend to get delayed during Mercury retrograde. Your Uber doesn't show up, or it shows up, but it shows up a block away. Or in our case, we have an address that is very similar. I live in Santa Monica, and we have an address that is very similar to one in Venice. Venice is just one little town over from Santa Monica here in LA, and no matter what, there will be something where we'll go, no, here's the zip code. And they'll go, no, I know where it is. And we even give them the intersection. They go, yeah, I got it. And they will fucking show up to the one in Venice. And it happens more often during a Mercury retrograde. So if I'm booking car service on Mercury retrograde, I am like, we're going to be super specific. We are going to talk about the exact date, time, location. Like I'm going to give you cross streets. We're going to get down to longitude and latitude to make sure that we have no miscommunication. This is when you need to double check and triple check your appointments. This is when you need to do things like say, we're going to have a meeting at 3 o'clock on Thursday. It needs to be, we're going to have a meeting at 3 o'clock Pacific on Thursday, the 11th. Oh, by the way, we're going to do the quarterly call, the Self-Management for Actors quarterly call on Thursday, July 11th, my birthday at 2:30 Pacific. Hang on. Where can you sign up? You can sign up here. Go here and sign up. Join us. It's free. It's free. Come join us. We're going to be talking all things self-management for actors on July 11th at 2:30 Pacific. We're doing some updates to the SMFA hot sheets right now here on the team, so you'll have a whole bunch of new updated information available for you with all of those. But go ahead and register for this. But my point is, if I just say, oh yeah, the quarterly call is on Thursday the 11th, or if I just say the quarterly call is coming up next Thursday, like here we are sitting here on Monday the 1st, and if I just say next Thursday, and in my mind, next Thursday is not this Thursday, it's next Thursday. But Mercury's about to go retrograde. I am not running the risk that we're going to miscommunicate the difference between this Thursday and next Thursday just because we have a different way of saying it. So this is a great time to be super specific about this Thursday, the 4th, or next Thursday, the 11th at 2:30 Pacific, like not just 2:30 Pacific, and in fact, 2:30 p.m. Pacific. Like the more specific you can be, the better off for your communication for Mercury retrograde. It affects travel because there's so much communication involved with travel. It affects, obviously, things going on in the law and in hospitals, as I mentioned already. There's a lot of that, but that also is boosted during full moons, which we have a full moon coming up a little later in July. Obviously, we have a full moon every month. But I want you to really take a look at places where you can over-communicate and be extra detailed. Watch out for your tech going haywire. Back up everything. Let me tell you what I do. Back up everything. And I back it up to like my auxiliary devices. Like I have a first generation iPad, seriously, like a 10-year-old, 9-year-old iPad that I back up all my contacts and all my calendars to, and I always make sure I do it right before Mercury goes retrograde or even a week before Mercury goes retrograde, just so I have one extra old standby place to get everything, not just the iPad mini, not just the iPhone, not just the backup drive. Like, yes, I do all that as well, but I make sure I do it another time to be 100% sure that there's backups all over the place. If there's ever something super important that I have to do where there's going to be communication, contracts, banking kind of stuff, I get that done ahead of time. And you don't start something new during Mercury retrograde. So here's what I mean by that. And this is where you're going to get like super powered info on this. Yes, I am a moonchild through and through, Becky. It's true. It's true. Pete says, does this include the internet? Yes. Communication includes the internet because obviously that is waves of communication. That is wires of communication. That is the cloud. Like if there's going to be a big tech outage, if there's going to be anything that gets hiccupy in tech, Mercury retrograde would be the time when it has the greatest impact. So again, it doesn't mean that it can't happen outside Mercury retrograde. It just means during Mercury retrograde, people lose their minds about it. It gets higher impact during Mercury retrograde. It has greater reach, greater impact is the way to look at it. And so for me, what that means is the not starting new things. I am really good about looking at the calendar way in advance. You know me and my 100-day challenges. So I set up 3 100-day challenges for myself per year. And then that gives me a few weeks per year of downtime to recalibrate and to check out what it is that's happening where and when. Mercury retrograde starts on July 7th. Thank you for asking. July 7th. So Sunday. So we got just under a week to kind of get things going. If we are like, no, I have to start something in July. Start right now. But we have an eclipse tomorrow, so that's a good time to close things off, not so much a time to start new things. So you may want to just now hold off the whole month of July if you haven't initiated the thing that you were hoping to initiate in July. So I take a look at my calendar from 100-day challenge perspective. I have 300-day challenges and then another 65 days that I can recalibrate, I can assess, I can take breaks. That's very important to me just for my own time management, my own schedule. One of the things that I do is I always map out with the help of my amazing team when all the Mercury retrogrades are so that I can do things like say, if we're going to, a perfect example, we are going to start a course on July 21st, while Mercury is still in retrograde. We are offering self-management for actors online, SMFA online. You can't register for it. I mean, technically you can register for it yet, but I don't have a sales page to send you to, and that's not why I'm doing this. So if you're like, oh, I want to do that, great. Come do the free quarterly call on July 11th, and I will be talking about it then and get you the information on how you can register. Great. I'm glad you came on the scope as well. Awesome. Thanks, Pete. I want you to consider that we didn't start building the new program, SMFA Online, during Mercury retrograde. And we didn't start planning how to market it or enroll people in it during Mercury retrograde. All of that took place in June. And so even though to you, it may look like a new program that we are starting in July during a Mercury retrograde, it is not going to be fraught with the same kinds of problems that would exist if we initiated creating it during a Mercury retrograde. Hey, Terry, glad you're here. Hi, Owen. You want to go back in time and change your whole life, says Stuff Tough over on YouTube. Yeah, well, Mercury retrograde is actually a fabulous time to revisit old things. So let's talk about that. Mercury retrograde, not a good time to start new things. A great time to revisit old things. Mercury retrograde, a phenomenal time to tie up loose ends, to close off stuff that needs to be done and finally let it go. And then when Mercury goes direct, burn some sage and move on to the new stuff. Mercury retrograde is also a time when you'll notice there are people in your life that you have not heard from in forever, and they come back around like magically. It's somebody you seriously have not even thought of for a while, or someone you think about, but you know, like y'all aren't in touch anymore and there would be no reason to get back in touch. Mercury retrograde is the time when folks like that will get back into your life. And it's because everybody's feeling that energy of tying up loose ends, or, that friendship never ended the way that I wanted it to. I kind of ghosted her and I really wish that I hadn't. I want to check on her. I'm just going to say, hi, I'm thinking of you in a quick text. And you'll notice that stuff like that happens way more during Mercury retrograde. So it's a wonderful use of your energy as well. If you've got old things that have kind of been left untidy, Mercury retrograde is a wonderful opportunity to use some of that reverse communication to go back to those conversations, those friendships, those relationships, those projects, and go, you know what, we need to actually close the books on this. Mercury retrograde is a great time if you produced a film that never got finished, but you owe some paperwork to SAG. And even though you're like, the film never made it to festivals, we didn't get it up on IMDb, but you did a project through SAG and you've got close the books paperwork to do, Mercury retrograde is a great time to sit quietly, focused on what needs to be closed up, and get all that stuff turned in. Turn it in after Mercury goes direct, but get the detail part of it done during Mercury retrograde. It's a wonderful use of that energy and that time. So try not to start something new. Feel free to advance things that are already in progress, and especially take a look at things that you could close off, loose ends or untidiness that you want to come back around and make feel a little more closed off. This is a perfect opportunity for all of that. Cool. So you and your wife were just talking about this, says Morris over on Periscope Twitter. Well, good. I mean, what were you chatting about? Tell me what kind of plans you're making. Does anybody here already do stuff kind of in prep for Mercury retrograde? Like, we have a trip during Mercury retrograde, unavoidable. It's just the time that the project is happening. Keith and I both are going to be speakers, instructors at camp that I grew up in Atlanta, and Atlanta Workshop Players is the acting studio that I came up with 40 something years ago, and I am now going to be their keynote speaker for their big acting camp and film producing camp this summer. And so Keith and I are traveling back to Atlanta, and then we're going to do this stuff with this camp, and then we're going to head back to LA. And I know, because it's during Mercury retrograde, to get everything in order long before, like booking cars, booking hotels, booking flights, like planning for when I'm going to see family members. Since I'm going back to Atlanta, obviously we're going to connect with family while we're there. All of that shit got arranged long before we got into Mercury retrograde. But it also means I am prepared to get alerts that this flight has been changed. This flight is now coming in here. Oh, now you've got a connection. Like, none of this would surprise me. So I've scheduled extra travel time so that I'm not running up against the clock during Mercury retrograde. Because the last thing you want to do is say, well, yeah, I know I'm cutting it close, but technically I can make it from the airport to my speaking engagement by whatever o'clock. When the truth of it is, Mercury retrograde is going to change everything by a couple of hours, and you need to really be sure that you're not snagged by that. Pete wants to know how long it lasts. Mercury goes direct this time on July 31st. So when I said pretty much consider the whole month in Mercury retrograde, it really is almost the entire month. So Mercury goes retrograde on the 7th, goes direct on the 31st. There are some people who say that they feel the effects of Mercury retrograde before, in what's called the shadow of Mercury retrograde. And then there are people who say that they feel it after it's gone direct for another week or so, again, due to the shadow of it. Jay, you summed it up perfectly over at YouTube. Mercury retrograde just means more planning. Yes, exactly. So more planning means also more watching out for people who haven't planned. Because it's kind of like everybody gets crazy on the road, so you can be prepared that it's going to take longer to get everywhere. And then that is going to make people more frantic. You don't want to be one of those frantic people. And so this is the time, Mercury goes retrograde 3 times a year-ish, sometimes can be 4. And it's for 3.5 weeks-ish each time. And one of the things that I always do, I do this in general, but especially during Mercury retrograde, is I always make sure that I leave super early for any appointment that I have, and I take a book, or I take my journal, or I whip out my phone and play some words with friends. But I am prepared, that I will whip out my phone and there will be no connection, no free Wi-Fi, no cell tower anywhere around because Mercury retrograde. So that can't be too surprising, right? So I always make sure that the car is gassed up and that I'm not like, oh, I'm leaving, I've got this appointment, oh shoot, I'm low on gas, let me run and fill up my tank real quick before I go XYZ. Like, that is like a recipe for disaster under Mercury retrograde, because you're going to go to the gas station and it's going to be, every pump is going to be in use and there's going to be two people stacked up at each one waiting to get to it. And you're like, oh my God, why is everybody doing this right this second? And it's like, because that energy has everybody snagged and showing up at things at the same time in ways that your planning can prevent you from being affected by quite as deeply. Don't sign any new contracts under Mercury retrograde. I know sometimes that's just unavoidable. So if you're in a situation where you're having to sign a contract for something you started planning earlier, remember what I said, if you started planning something earlier than Mercury retrograde and got all the details in order, and then you just have to do the signing of the contract under Mercury retrograde, please double check, triple check, have other sets of eyes, like have your attorney look it over, get really clear on everything that's in all the contracts so that you like got it all set and nothing's going to confuse you, right? Because this is the time when it could be just like a slight miscommunication that then ends up messing up your rights a little bit. So it's important to have that other set of eyes on there and really look at it. And if you're working with something where you can be a little flexible, say, can we sign this in August? Would be great. But if you can't, if it can't be avoided, you got to sign the contract. Just make sure you double and triple check everything. Pete is asking over at Periscope, wouldn't it be strange if all social media sites went down? Well, that's the funny thing about a few months ago here with the last Mercury retrograde, when there was a day where Facebook and Instagram, obviously because they're both Facebook properties, went down, and Google was a major outage. It didn't affect all of the internet using Google, but a huge chunk of Google went down. And for just a few minutes for Google, but for an hour or more with Facebook and Instagram, which is kind of shocking when you think about how many billions of dollars are infused in these businesses and how much tech they have, like how much stuff obviously is up and running those machines and those empires. It's a little shocking when something's down that length of time. I didn't get shocked at all by the whole thing. I'm like, yes, this is a great time to use that time and do some reflective work, do some journaling, go within, do some communicating that doesn't involve technology if you have to communicate at all, but even better, go put yourself in the tub, like go for a walk, go do some super low tech activities. That's what Mercury retrograde is really great for. So it never surprises me when that kind of thing happens because, and again, it can happen anytime. It's that when it happens during Mercury retrograde, the ripple effects are fascinatingly more intense. Kate is asking over at Facebook, what if you book a voiceover job that records during Mercury retrograde? Kate, I love this question because the specificity is really important here. If you book the job before Mercury retrograde, good news, the die's already been cast. The project has already started before we head into Mercury retrograde. So just like SMFA Online is a course that we're going to offer that starts during Mercury retrograde, the project itself didn't start during Mercury retrograde. The project itself started back in June or before when we decided to create this new course. So for your participation, as long as you got involved before Mercury went retrograde, certainly you want to be a smart cookie and pay attention to double and triple checking the details. You want to give yourself lots of extra time. You want to be prepared if, oh my God, I remember doing a podcast interview during Mercury retrograde. We were hosting a guest on the podcast at a time when I was interviewing someone each episode. So this would have been like season 8 or 9. Yeah, season 8. Season 8 of our podcast, The Work, which is on iTunes and at, what's the one that starts with an S? Why do I always forget it? Spotify. I think that's what it's called. Obviously, I'm not a big Spotify user because I totally blanked on its name. Anyway, the podcast The Work is available. Go grab it, listen to it. You've got 10 seasons to listen to. Back when we did season 8, I was interviewing guests every episode. And we had this one episode that we were interviewing someone during Mercury retrograde. We had her over here So like all our tech is like set up, good to go. It's been reliable for all the other guests that we've had previously. There's no reason that things should go sideways, right? And we, for some reason, couldn't get the recording to take. And my tech was here and everything. Like, we're using a board, professional microphones. Like, I mean, there is no reason that things went sideways, but we tried 3 times. We, in fact, did the interview thrice and never once did it record, even though the board was showing us that it was recording. And I have no idea where that audio went. It's not like it got stored somewhere different on the machine. It's like we were looking at everything and it's like, yep, okay, the levels are there. Here we go. It's going to go into the right. Like everything looked right. The file size looked like it should be right. And then it just was never there. And we're like, it's like back in the old days, this would be a magnet up against your data and like pulling off, like demagnetizing your credit cards or your database or whatever. It was so weird. And of course, Mercury was retrograde. And so that's the kind of thing that, even though we had planned that broadcast before, went wrong during. So Kate, you do still want to be on the lookout for all the things that are within your control, which is be early, be prepared for things to run long. So don't have something immediately scheduled right after it. And if you are recording on your own site, for some reason, if you're not going into a producer's booth, but you're actually doing something from your home studio, really double, triple check everything. Here's a perfect example. Today, I knew I was going live at 2:30 on this broadcast. And I went, I just broadcast last week, so I shouldn't have to do this, but let me check and just make sure. Logged in at Restream, and on my dashboard it says the API has expired for YouTube. You have to recertify your YouTube account for this live stream to push to YouTube. And I'm like, glad I checked. So I went in and did the recertification because I wasn't checking it like 1 minute till it was time to broadcast. I did this like a half hour before. And I went, okay, good. That's exactly why we do this. And so I went in and recertified and blah, 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 did all the details. Great. Then I launched Ecamm, which is what I use to actually capture the video and send it through to Restream. And Ecamm goes, hey, we have a software update. Would you like to do it? And I'm like, yes, because I don't want to wait and do it during Mercury retrograde. We want to do it before. So I hit yes, let's do it. And I'm like, oh my God, this is a perfect example of the kind of stuff that during Mercury retrograde, you may find yourself going, oh, I'll go live and not even check for those things. And then find that you can't broadcast the way you think you're going to because you didn't have time to do the things. And so sure enough, that's, when am I broadcasting again that is relevant to this? July 23rd, I'm doing another Facebook Live. And that's why I was like, I know that I need to get all these updates done now because even though we're pretty close to Mercury retrograde, I'd rather do it now than not. And then have those broadcasts that are still coming up this month be affected by not having done the updates. But perfect example. Good, good, good. I'm glad this is helpful. Good. Finishing your degree in the next month. Eliza, that's amazing. Congratulations, sweetheart. Oh my God. That's fantastic. What a great activity for July to like really get those last details attended to. And Jay, doctor's appointment during retrograde, but they were planned earlier. Yep. Perfect. But be prepared, Jay, for them to be running late, running behind, needing you to wait longer than expected. If they're drawing blood or doing anything where they're taking tests, this is when like they take your blood pressure and get 3 different readings depending on what time they took it, even just across a 10-minute office visit, just because the tech communicates in wonky ways. So also on that, if you're getting your blood pressure read and it's like unusually high or unusually low during Mercury retrograde, you go, can I get you to run that again? That just seems off. And get them to do it a second time because a lot of times it can be the tech and not you. That's true anytime, but especially during Mercury retrograde, you would want to insist that they give it another shot. What kinds of things do you do to prep for Mercury retrograde? If there's anything other than what I've already mentioned. I mean, or if you want to just reinforce something that I've said. Because for me, it's check the plans again, check the plans again, make sure I'm leaving early. Make sure I'm leaving early. Make sure I'm prepared to not have something immediately scheduled right after. Don't pack that scheduled like this during Mercury retrograde. Give it lots of breathing room and be so patient with everybody else out on the road and in travel because they're going to be crazy and I just need to not add to that energy. Cracker Jack says, all of Slack went down last Friday. Not even the giants are immune. Excellent point. Excellent point. Not even the giants are immune. And of course, it can happen anytime, Mercury retrograde or not. We can have tech outages. The chaos that it creates tends to be exacerbated during Mercury retrograde. Don't panic. Breathe, says Jay. Yes, ma'am. That is right. That is right. Don't panic. Because the only thing you can control, really, is your own response to whatever it is that's going on. I mean, and that's true anytime. And because we can control our own response to what's going on, all the more reason to just give things lots of space, breathe, stay present, know that there's a lot of things that people might want to take personally, especially because it's Cancer season right now. My birthday, Cancer. Everybody's grandma, but Cancer, very sensitive. Very sensitive. So you will find, even if you're not generally a sensitive person, that you get more sensitive to the things that get said and done during Cancer season. So very important that we give a lot of space to communication that seems like, oh, that was so rude. If we're able to go, it's not about me. It's not personal. That's not about me. Really try and not take things personally, if at all possible. Maria says, my kids are very naughty like never before. Oh, Maria, I love that. That youthful energy that just is like during all of it. Oh my God, it's so good. I mean, I love the emojis that you chose too, because it's kind of like, but at the same time, I mean, they're your kids. You love them. But man, do they love feeling that energy like on high, right? Becky wants to know, how does it affect relationships? Well, relationships are definitely something in which you need communication. But of course, a lot depends on your sign, your partner's sign, other factors that have nothing to do with your actual sign, but your moon in particular, and your rising, and how y'all deal with one another in those intimate ways. But I would just, if you haven't gotten the SMFA, we renamed it. It's no longer the SMFA calendar. It's called the Aligned Hustle calendar. And you can get this for $5 on our website. This is my copy that I wrote corrections on. So like, you don't have my little ink circles on the one that you get at our store. But this is my version that I made corrections on for us to make sure that we had the final tweaks before we uploaded. But the Aligned Hustle calendar that we put out every month, it's $5. And I've got in here things like Mars going into Leo today. Okay, so Mars is the planet that affects a lot of your anger and how you fight. And Leo is the ego sign. Leo is all about pride and like, nah, I am important. And so you add Mars to Leo, which just started today, and you got some fire and pride, and it can be feisty. So that is going to be very interesting. And then of course, tomorrow we have the solar eclipse with the new moon in Cancer. So it's a fantastic time for lots of healing. There's a lot of really good healing energy these first like 10 days of July. Just tons and tons and tons of opportunity to heal and close off things that haven't been healing correctly. And then as we go into Wednesday, we've got Venus in Cancer. So Venus is how we love, and Cancer, of course, is very sensitive. And so, Becky, I would be willing to bet that a lot of the domestic focus going on right now is going to be more sensitive than usual. Of course, how you react to that depends on your signs. So for me, I'm Cancer. My husband, Keith, he's Pisces. We're already all the sensitive. I mean, my God, 2 water signs over here in the creative arts together. Like we're constantly crying and taking bubble baths. It's just all the sensitive. It's great. Thank God for our other signs that try to balance some of that out. But again, that's going to really depend on how confronting that might look to you based on what your sign is. But let me see what else might be of interest for you specifically, Becky, knowing what I know. Monday the 8th, we go into a Libra moon, which is really great for teamwork. So if you need to kind of come together and you can't wait until August to like sit down and have some State of the Union conversations, you're going to do better together on the 8th. But just keep in mind, Mercury just went retrograde on the 7th. So communication is going to be challenging no matter what. So if it can't wait till August, y'all have to talk something out. Choose the 8th. I would also say the 9th, because that's also a Libra moon, except there's a void moon on the 9th. And so that's kind of like a mini Mercury retrograde. Your Libra and Taurus, Becky, yeah. Let me see what might be good for you. Can you wait till like the 25th, 26th? to talk through some important stuff. We'll be headed toward the end of Mercury retrograde. We'll go into a Taurus moon, which is going to benefit y'all both. And Mercury will be in Cancer, which means the communication will be more emotional, but from a perspective of reflection because of it also Mercury being in retrograde. Something to keep in mind. Yeah, I don't know, sweetie. That's challenging. We can talk more about it, obviously, in the dojo, but we head into a Cancer moon again the 29th through the 31st, which of course, or to the 30th, which is going to be domestic again, but that's still the end of Mercury retrograde. So, interesting. Let's see. Nick says, I simply want to ignore Mercury retrograde and pretend it ain't happening. Nick, I'm with you. I'm all about things flowing, all is working, success, abundance, good things. Like my mantras are on high all the time, but especially during Mercury retrograde where I'm like, all is well. I have everything I need. Everything is always working out for me. That's a big Abraham Hicks one that Keith and I use all the time. He especially uses it, and it's always true for him. Like he just like ass into luck all the time. Like he calls himself the luckiest man in the world, and he is not wrong because he just bumps into everything blessed. Like he just totally is there. So it totally works for him to walk around like that and really does not pay attention to, oh, it's Mercury retrograde. The reason I pay attention to it is because my work involves communication to such an intense degree. And I have so many clients at so many levels coming to me with, I have to meet with my agent, blah, 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 blah. I have to negotiate through my agent with the studio about this contract, blah, blah, blah. And we're like really talking about specific things that can't wait because it's not like you can tell, Warner Brothers, hey, can we talk about this in August? I mean, you can if you're a certain level star, but for most of my clients, we're at a level where we have to go in and have that appointment. We have to have that meeting with that agent or that casting director at that time. And how do we make the most of it by controlling the things that we can control? And I totally agree, Nick, on getting very specific in the mantra and the affirmation part of it and saying, all is well and I have everything that I need and everything is flowing beautifully. There's an article that I wrote a couple years ago that if my team is here, I'll ask one of y'all to plop it into the chat here at Facebook. That's called Mercury Retro Grace. And one of my masterminders actually came up with that phrase, and I love it because when we were talking about during one of the mastermind meetings how to wrangle this upcoming at that time Mercury retrograde month or 3.5 weeks that we were about to go into, I said just have a lot of grace. Have a lot of grace, especially like right now, Cancer season, everybody's going to be extra sensitive. And there's a lot of Leo shit going on that makes it more dramatic than it needs to be. That combination of Cancer and Leo, oh, for fuck's sake. It's going to be emotional, sensitive, and dramatic. And I can live in it because I'm a Cancer and my Venus is in Leo. So I'm like, I stew in this shit all the time. But it can be really challenging for people who are a lot less water sign or who don't have something so close in like Venus in Leo or whatever. But so the drama, the emotion, the sensitivity, blah. What we talked about for this particular mastermind session was how whatever time of the year that it was, I was like, just treat it with a lot of grace. I think it was during a sign that can be particularly biting or cruel. And so the Mercury retrograde communication things that go sideways can actually be really mean. And so I was saying, let's just treat everything with a lot of grace. Let's just be just extra on the grace. And she said, let's call it Mercury retro grace. And I said, oh my God, that's genius. And I guess none of my team is clocked in for today's live, or they're trying to find the link. I will come back over to Facebook and plop the link in the comments if I don't see my team popping in and doing that. But I'm pretty sure I've got somebody who's watching in case we started talking about things that y'all might need to access. But Mercury Retro Grace, great way to remember what do I need to do during Mercury retrograde other than don't start no shit, don't sign no shit. I need to basically treat everyone with a lot of grace. I need to double check everything. I need to give myself a lot of extra time for all the things that I know I'm going to have on my schedule. And I need to prepare for those who've not prepared so that when shit goes sideways for them, it doesn't affect me quite so much. that would be how I would sum it all up. But I totally agree with you, Nick, on just being in a place of everything is going to be just fine. Mercury retrograde tends to be a superpower time for me because that energy that other people have of running around losing their shit, I don't have. And the reason I don't have that is because of how I've prepared for it. Totally how I've prepared for it. By knowing that this is something that could potentially snag folks, I am in a better position to handle everything because I've already prepped against the things that at least I know I could possibly see coming. And in the end, hopefully I prepared for chaos that never happened. And then you go, oh, well, see, what was this, like the Y2K virus? Why was it, we were all in a tizzy about this thing that never happened. And I'm like, it never happened because of all the work we put into it to make sure nothing went down. That's part of what preparing is. Cool. Any last questions before we close off on today's Facebook Live? Facebook Live, also YouTube Live, also Periscope, through Twitter, all the places. Okay, just a reminder, new moon tomorrow, solar eclipse in Cancer, healing, 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 healing. It is a great time to reclaim anything physically that hasn't been going well for you. I am so ready for tomorrow's eclipse. I am so ready for tomorrow's eclipse. So ready. Also, we will do the SMFA tune-up call. Make sure you have signed up right there. Got it? Sign up for that. smfa4.com. Go there. That stands for Self-Management for Actors, 4th edition.com. Go there, sign up, join us on Thursday the 11th, my birthday, for our free tune-up call. It is so much fun. You will want to be there. We basically answer all the questions you have about the industry and your life in it. We could talk a little woo-woo then too, but that's generally not the focus of those calls. It's to follow up on what's been going on since the book first came out, because books are out of date the second they get printed by nature of what printing is. It is putting something in writing and saying, now this is true. And it's like, and life keeps going and things keep changing. So updates, we do them through the calls. Also pay attention to the lunar eclipse, full moon in Capricorn on the 16th, but that's a void moon as well. SMFA Online. If you want to enroll in SMFA Online, we will welcome you to do so as we get to next week and the quarterly call. But that is going to start up on July the 21st and go through August 31st. It's a 6-week interactive hot seat program that we are going to run in a Facebook group. And I'm super excited because we're going to do like Zoom things where we put people in the hot seat and do a deep dive on your stuff and make sure that your tools are in great order. And this is awesome for people who are like, yeah, the 100 days looks too intimidating to me. That's a lot. It's a long commitment. And that mindset and woo-woo is a little much for me. Can we just get going on my tools? Obviously, there will always be mindset in everything that I do, because I can't not bring the mindset and the woo. It's just a part of who I am. But this is a drill down, short-term, 6-week interactive focus. And this is specifically because I'm not touring in 2019. I decided I'm not touring around. I mean, even though I just mentioned I'm going to Atlanta, I'm not doing any speaking engagements or classes there other than what I'm doing through Atlanta Workshop Players. I'm going specifically for their event and then spending time with family. So because last year I was in New York twice, and Chicago and Toronto and London and Berlin, as well as some vacation time in the Greek Isles, I was all over the place last year. And that was so much traveling that we decided this year, no traveling. We also decided fewer one-day intensives here in LA. Therefore, we wanted to offer this to give you an opportunity to do the live interactive work with me, even if I'm not coming to your town. Sarah asking at YouTube, Chicago 2020, please, maybe. We'll evaluate at the end of this year what the calendar needs to look like for 2020. And Chicago is always one of my favorite places to go. So maybe I will keep you posted. But I was just there a year ago, like May 2018. I was in Chicago. Where were you? I was there. And if you were there and you were in my classes there, I have forgotten because I had a lot on my mind, and it was a year and a month ago. I had a lot on my mind because I'd just come off bed rest. For those who are like, what was on your mind? I had just gotten off bed rest and made myself do the trip, and it was hard and exhausting, but I committed. So I was going to do it, even though I was like heavily medicated and in a lot of pain. Made it happen, because that's what you do if you're Bonnie Gillespie. What else do I want to tell you about on this calendar? If you want to do SMFA online, I mean, if you snoop around at our online store, you'll find it and you can register. Someone just did that last week. I was like, how did someone register for our course already? And it's like, because it is there. It's at the store. We're just not selling it yet. And it's in a Facebook group that hasn't opened yet. So it's like, you can be early if that helps you to just know that you got it done. But we got no welcome kit or anything to give you yet. So come back to the Big Apple, por favor, says Kate. I was there 2 times in 2018. I was there in May and October. You know I love New York. You know I love New York. Texas, says Becky. What part are you in, Becky? I know this somewhere. Where are you? Are you in Houston? I think you're in Houston. I don't think I've been to Houston. Not for self-management for actors. I think I may have been there like in my life, like as a kid. I think there's family that might be somewhere near there. I've been to Austin and taught there a couple of times. I was at South by Southwest on a panel for their filmmaker part of the South by Southwest Festival. I love Austin. Austin's one of my favorite places on the planet. But I think you are in Houston. Kate says, I know, I saw you. All right, sweetheart. Of course you did. Of course you did. Thank you for reminding me. I think also at some point we just start losing our minds as we age. I'm not going to focus on that. I'm turning 49 next week. I'm trying not to call that 100. It's 49. It's 49, whatever. But I'm also like, it's 49. Sweet Jesus, it's 49. All right, what else do you need to know on the calendar? On the 23rd, I'm doing another Facebook Live. I have not decided on a topic yet, so if you have a suggestion, I always want to hear about those. What else do you need to know? Those of you who are in Getting Gear for the Next Year Live, we have calls coming up on the 10th and the 20th and the 30th because we do those every 10 days. Those of you in Expansive Capacity, we have our Mastermind Zoom on the 19th. Oh my God, my calendar is full of all the awesome. All right, you beautiful people. No more questions, no more concerns about Mercury Retrograde. We got some plans, right? Double check everything. Give lots of space and lots of grace to everything you experience during Mercury Retrograde. And if you have to move forward on something that is incredibly detailed or communication-based or requires that you sign a contract or take a meeting that you're like, there's no way we can do this outside of Mercury Retrograde, just give it lots of double checking and lots of time and lots of grace, and don't be too sensitive. I know, easier said than done, especially with this little Cancer girl. I'm a just be like licking my little wounds like crazy because it's a time to be sensitive. I told Keith we're supposed to get a puppy in December. I told him like last night, let's just get a puppy now. Let's just do it now because I need my energy focused into something that is like healing and nurturing and taking care of a puppy and teaching it how to like pee and poop and all that kind of stuff. Just to me feels like where I need to put my focus right now. So that may be a development sooner than we had planned. But whatever it is that works for you, make sure that you engage in self-care, because no matter what time of year it is, that is an investment that will always pay off. So take care of yourself, you beautiful people. I love you. Thank you for joining me. Till next time, stay ninja. Bye.